In this video, you'll be shocked how Ayaan Hirsi Ali destroys the Islamophobia myth in 5 minutes. Globally, no religion has a phobia attached to it except Islam. There is no Christianophobia, Hindunophobia, or Buddhinophobia. If you are new here, welcome to Tell Me Dr. K. If you are not, welcome back. This is Tell Me Dr. K, a channel manipulative religious leaders we should never discover. Because on this channel, we cut through the noise and expose the hypocrisy. If you crave for deep dives like this one, subscribe and smash the notice bell. And by doing so, you are helping us to continue bringing you more deep dives like this one. In this video, Ayaan responds to questions from students. And one of the students tells Ayaan, a survivor of Islamic fundamentalism, that would rather convert than fight. Her response: it's time to develop a backbone. Watch how Ayaan Hirsi dismantles the naive student's mindset and explains why the West's refusal to identify the enemy is the greatest threat of the survival of the West since the Cold War. False equivalence of Islamophobia. The student naivety. The student attempts to bridge Islamophobia with historical atrocities like the Holocaust and African slavery. This reveals a blank slate view of history that assumes all grievances are created equal and that Islamophobia is organic prejudice identical to anti-Semitism. Now, it's important to understand that Islamophobia is a narrative created by Islamic scholars to protect Islam against criticism. Ayaan Hirsi deconstructs Islamophobia as a manufactured political weapon. While the West has reckoned with its past, slavery, segregation, through internal struggle and Christian-inspired reform, she argues Islamophobia is designed to exploit Western guilt to pave way for the caliphate. She asserts that anti-Semitism is unique ancient hatred, while Islamism is a modern subversive political movement, the Fallacy of Compromise with Totalitarianism.
I would like to reiterate the thanks for your time here at the University of Austin. What I wanted to ask you was, you speak of Islamophobia and classes like Black Studies as phony ideological things, but I was curious as to what makes them different. What makes white supremacy different, or like Islamophobia so different from anti-Semitism, as there, we did import many African slaves that died in the millions, and so did South American countries even more so. We did force Native Americans on forced marches and genocide. There are Muslims being massacred in China today. So what makes anti-Semitism so different?
Two things. One is we have reckoned in America and in Western European countries, we've had a great reckoning with our past. We've addressed the fact that we engaged in slavery, we fought a war, we ended it. We had segregation, we had another major fight, we ended it. We had the civil rights movement. We brought women out of, and by the way, in fighting for all of those emancipations, the people who were heading these fights were constantly quoting from the Bible. They were believing Christians and they were inspired by their Christianity. So number one, we had that reckoning. Number two, anti-Semitism is the oldest hatred in humanity, and you find it, believe it or not, across the entire world. What made the West different after they nearly exterminated their Jews was to have that honest look in the mirror and reckon with what they did. And then those campaigns to end it. Islamophobia is a made-up word. It's made up by a political movement that wants to exploit and capitalize on white guilt to achieve its end goal, which is the revival of the caliphate. And the revival of the caliphate is to convert all of us into Islam, whether we like it or not. Those of us who refuse to do that, we will surely be beheaded. I'm sure I'm on top. And that is their end goal. And so they're exploiting these Western part of subversion. This is just a guest speech, but I wish that at some point someone here could start a lecture series on subversion, on active measures, on asymmetric warfare, that would get you interested in what it is that the Islamists are doing and how they've become so successful against these great nations with this incredible military and economic structures, and yet the Islamists are winning. Islam is spreading. They're doing better today than they were doing in 2001 after they hit us and we invaded Afghanistan. They've got Afghanistan back. They have Iraq back. They have Syria. And these Muslim governments are they're shaking in their boots. They're worried about what could happen to them because of the Islamist movement, and that's why the Islamist movement came here. And they're exploiting principles like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, and so on. And of course, these progressive movements that we have here, we've got to understand that, and we've got to become really creative in finding a way of preserving our principles. I don't want to give up on the freedom of speech, but on the other hand, on beating the Islamists at their game.
The students' naivety. When asked about the threat of beheading for non-conversion, the students respond with shocking indifference, stating they would not mind converting because they are agnostic.
Is there room for compromise between principles?
If I want to kill you and behead you, unless you convert to the religion I dictate, what would be the place of compromise?
Well, I would not mind converting, as I myself am an agnostic, so have no faith. Have no established faith. However, I understand that some people would not share that vision. So
this suggests a total misunderstanding of what living under Sharia law entails, reducing the fundamental laws of liberty to a mere change of labels. She exposes a student's lack of backbone. She points out that conversion isn't just a mental shift, it's a total submission that dictates the treatment of women, Jews, and the end of free thought.
Let's play with this thought for a while. There's a time and a place for everything. And for some of the people, say in places like Africa, we don't talk about this, but Islamists are active in Africa and violently so. If you're a Christian in Egypt or a Hindu in parts of Pakistan, and you have someone looking at you and saying, you'll either lose your head or you convert to Islam, it makes sense to consider converting to Islam. But here today, for us to have the attitude of, well, we'll see what happens, and if we get to that point, I'll just convert, I will say, are you sure? Maybe you want to get educated on what would happen once you convert. What would your life be like, and the life of your sisters and women? What would they do to the Jews? He has said, this man, I repeat it, he said they're bacteria and they're microbes. And in the video that I showed you, they made it very clear it has nothing to do with Palestine. It has everything to do with them being Jewish. So they are going to annihilate the Jews. Will you stand by and watch that? Maybe I should give Introduction to Islam and Islamism as a lecture series, and once you understand what it's all about, you might develop a backbone.
I would look forward to that greatly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our insight is that you cannot compromise with an ideology that demands your total annihilation or total submission. The peacemaker versus the reality of war. The student naivety. A second student invokes the Sermon on the Mount and the desire to be a peacemaker, expressing fear that identifying Islamism as a threat is simply scapegoating. This reflects a common Western paralysis. A fear of self-defense is a form of bigotry. Hirsi Ali's profound insight. She invokes the legal principle that the Constitution is not a suicide pact.
I already started my question, but my question is inspired by what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount about blessed are the peacemakers. So we see in human nature a desire to scapegoat, right? And you're arguing that the Jews are being there's a movement, or there's something that is trying to present Jews as the scapegoat, right? You talk about two important forces. Maybe the Islam nation state, which is like a political power, which is a threat, but then also this, like, you talk about this network, like mosques all over the place, and these, communities and all, it's infiltrating America. and the West. So if we don't want to fall into our natural tendency to scapegoat and just become, instead of moving from anti-Semitism to anti-Islamicism, and our goal is to be peacemakers, then how do we do that? But at the end of your last question, you framed it as a violent struggle, right? If it's a violent struggle, then who is our enemies and what do we do?
Right after 9/11, you were probably not born. How old were you on 9/11?
I was born in 2004.
2004, so before you. So right after 9/11, 2001, when we were having these discussions about how to treat this enemy that wasn't a state, but that was determined to destroy us, some of the discussions were, but we can't do this because of the Constitution. We can't do that because of the Constitution. We can't do this because... And a very frustrated judge or Justice Posner said, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. So I don't think there is a lot of space between committing suicide and doing what the young man here said, is to let it just all happen. And I mean, when the time comes, I guess we will convert or we'll deal with it, whatever. And really looking at and studying openly, which we haven't been able to do because we've been self-censoring, and I gave you that list of all the different ways in which we underestimated the Islamist movement. But if we were to estimate it the right way, I will say in our history in America, it's not the first time that we are fighting an ideology that wants to destroy us. Communism, just the other day, not so long ago, most of us lived through it. And you call it a Cold War here, but in Africa and in other parts of the world, it wasn't cold, it was hot. And we starved and all of it. So there were very good reasons for the United States and Western countries to fight the ideology of communism. And they developed a number of, I'd say, tools to recognize it when it's applying internal subversive methods and when it's coming from an external position. And we can reapply those, but we do have to identify Islamism and Islamists as the enemy that they are and give them the full respect. You asked me to identify and you asked me to define what is an enemy. It's a force that wants to destroy you. How do I know that? In this infrastructure of mosques and madrasas and Islamic centers, etc., they say it explicitly. So there is something about don't listen to me, don't listen to the analysts with PhDs and the like. Listen to them and what they say and take it at their word.
Ayaan argues that peace is impossible when the other side has already declared total war on your values. She frames the conflict not as a scapegoat, but an identification of a literal enemy, a force that explicitly states its intention to destroy you. Subversion and failure of admission. The student seems to be unaware how the Western freedoms are being utilized against the West. They view mosques and Islamic centers solely through the lens of freedom of religion, failing to see them as potential infrastructure for subversive political movement.
So does this come down to a propaganda war? Like we just inculcate our children before they do? Is that where the battle lies?
I think because the war they wage is totalitarian and total.
But ours,
and
where do we meet them?
Well, we have to meet, ours has to be total too. It has to be where they fight us with ideas, we fight them with ideas. Where they fight us with subversive means, we recognize that and we dismantle this infrastructure and kick them out of the country. We have those tools, we have these possibilities. We can't just let them spread. And this, again, we did the same to communists. We watched as communists grew and as they were subverting our societies, and we took the appropriate measures against individuals, against groups, and so on, but always with due process. And always within the limits of the Constitution. But we can't, again, I repeat, the Constitution is not a suicidal pact.
Ayaan profound insight. She warns that Islamists are winning because they use the Western's own principles, freedom of speech and association, to subvert it. She highlights the impoliteness paradox, where the Western leaders, like the mayor of Amsterdam, refuse to demand assimilation out of misplaced fear of appearing like Nazis. Her insight is that tolerance of the intolerant leads to the destruction of the tolerant. Think about that. If this deep dive has opened your mind to Islamism, like, subscribe, and smash the notice bell for more. The more you like, subscribe, and share, you are helping us to continue bringing you more deep dives like this one. To watch other videos where we've exposed Islamic fundamentalism, click on this link.